What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to College Football Talk with Peter Burtonette. In today's episode, I'm going to be previewing the Week 4 action and giving my predictions like I do every week. Did pretty well last week. Went 6-3 straight up. Brings my record on the season in games that I predict on the channel here to 17-15, 2-2 against the spread, which brings me to 7-14. Still quite a bit under 500 there, but trying to improve that. But before I get into this week's predictions, if you're going to enjoy this video, please feel free to leave a like, consider subscribing to the channel, and turn on those post notifications so you're always up to date whenever I upload. But starting things out, going over the game that, first of all, is earliest out of these matchups I'm going to be talking about, and also the one that I think probably has the highest stakes in it. That's number 17, Texas Tech, at number 16, Utah. Both of these Big 12 teams are 3-0, both of them playing in their conference opener. It's going to be noon Eastern time. I guess for both of these fan bases, you're going to be watching these games at 11 a.m. Central Time, 10 a.m. Mountain Time. For Utah, the Utes have gotten things started with 2 road wins against a UCLA team that has fired their head coach, Deshaun Foster. That's obviously been some big news in college football this week. And then also at Wyoming. Wyoming, honestly, might be a little bit of a better opponent than UCLA is. For Texas Tech, they're coming off a 45-14 win over Oregon State. Baron Morton has passed for over 900 yards, 11 touchdowns, and just 1 interception through 3 games. The Red Raiders have also had 4 different running backs with over 100 yards. On the flip side, Utah's Devin Dampier has accounted for over 800 total yards and 8 touchdowns. To me, the key player to watch in this game is Utah's John Henry Daly. He has 5 sacks, which is tied for first in college football. A player of his caliber is going to be really important in limiting Dampier, creating havoc for him. So that will be kind of, I think, a key player to keep an eye on. Meanwhile, Texas Tech just kind of has a well-rounded overall unit. They've held opponents to just 219 rushing yards total over 3 games. So that's good for an average of a little over, what would that be like, or just under 75 rushing yards per game. Both defenses have 4 turnovers forced. I think both have 4 interceptions and a forced fumble. So turnovers are pretty even in this game. Neither team is like the best of the best at doing it, but they both have been able to do it so far. I think home field advantage and the coaching experience of Kyle Whittingham will be really key here. I think also the play of John Henry Daly as well. So I'm going with Utah 27, Texas Tech 24, though I could see it maybe being a little bit more high scoring than that. Next up, an important game in SEC play between 2 teams who I think are still kind of in that dark horse territory, but a win for either team here would put them into the contender category. Number 22 Auburn at number 11 Oklahoma. Both teams are 3-0, and the Sooners are favored by 6.5 here. Jackson Arnold returns to Norman. He comes back with an Auburn Tigers offense that includes 2 really good wide receivers, Eric Singleton and Cam Coleman. He's been putting up some pretty good numbers, Arnold has, with both of those receivers to throw to. Meanwhile, John Mateer has thrown for 944 yards. Obviously, he's been able to run the ball really well as well, but he does have 3 interceptions. However, kind of on that point, if this was a defense in Auburn that had been intercepting the ball, even if they had something like 3, 4, 5 interceptions in the early stage of the season, I'd be a little bit more concerned because I think it's an area they can exploit. And I think Auburn still can. Just because they haven't gotten more than 1 interception doesn't mean that their DBs can't get the job done here. But I think the question is going to be for the Auburn defense. Can defensive ends like Kayron Crawford, who has 3 sacks, and their linebackers minimize John Mateer's legs? They've shown, especially with Crawford, that they can get into that backfield and create some pressure. But if Mateer is able to kind of run wild, it could be a long day for the Auburn defense. It's also going to be key for Oklahoma's defensive backs to limit those wide receivers. They have 10 pass deflections as a unit. And then linebacker Sammy Omosigo has 3 of those pass deflections. He actually leads the way, so I think he'll be a key part of the Oklahoma defense against this Auburn passing game. Honestly, I think Oklahoma has the edge offensively, just in terms of what their quarterback can do with both passing the ball and running the ball. And I think their defense also has a slight edge as well. but I will be keeping an eye on how Auburn's defense does, especially against John Mateer's running ability. I'm going to go with Oklahoma here to cover and maybe even win a little bit more comfortably than what some people might think. I'm going to go with Oklahoma 34, Auburn 24. I think the Sooners are really good, and this will vault them kind of further into that SEC contender range. Next up, a game that I will actually get to be attending. I'm really looking forward to this one. You've got number 21 Michigan, who's 2-1, favored by 2.5 at 3-0 Nebraska. Dylan Raiola has thrown for over 800 yards, 8 touchdowns, and has not thrown an interception yet. Did go up against Cincinnati in week 1. Other than that, the level of competition has not been there. Bryce Underwood looked better, much better actually, in week 3 than he did against Oklahoma. Now, obviously, part of that is down to the quality of opponent, but I also think he's getting a little bit more comfortable in that Wolverines offense. To me, the big question here is, can the Cornhuskers slow down Justice Haynes and the Michigan running attack? They, as a defense, have allowed 136 rushing yards per game, which is pretty middle of the road. I think it's right barely into the bottom half of college football, but it's right around that midway range. Another kind of interesting thing of note, Ernest Hausman is coming home to Nebraska. He is from, I think, Columbus High School, which is a little bit west of Omaha. So he's coming back. He, I think, spent a season or a couple of seasons with Nebraska. Jayshon Barham and the Michigan secondary will also test Raiola. I think Michigan has the edge. I think it's a really slight edge. It's a small spread, but I think Nebraska actually even finds a way to cover. I think this is the type of game where, Nebraska maybe goes ahead with a late field goal or a late touchdown. Michigan goes down and potentially wins the game on a field goal. I'm going to go with Michigan 24, Nebraska 23. Next up, this is probably honestly a bigger game in the Big Ten. At least in the present moment. I think both of these teams will maybe not quite measure up to some of the other contenders in the Big Ten, but that's number 9, Illinois, and number 19, Indiana. Both teams are 3-0. Both teams are really similar, but the Hoosiers have kind of a bit of a heavy spread here. They're favored by 5.5. What I talked about these two teams being similar, the quarterbacks are nearly identical. Luke Altmaier has thrown for 709 yards and 8 touchdowns. And Fernando Mendoza, the Cal transfer, has thrown for 708 yards and 9 touchdowns. So 1 yard off and 1 touchdown off. The running backs are also very similar. Caden Fagan for Illinois and Kaelon Black have both rushed for right around 220 yards. And then leading receivers Hank Beatty for Illinois and Omar Cooper Jr. for Indiana have right around 290 receiving yards. So these two offenses are very similar, and their defenses are similar as well. Both teams haven't really quite faced elite competition yet. To me, Illinois probably has a better win. They went on the road and beat Duke. Indiana's allowed 7.6 points per game, and Illinois has allowed 7.3 points per game. To me, though, the X factor in this game, I think, is going to be Illinois linebacker Gabe Jacas. He has 3.5 sacks and 2 forced fumbles through 3 games. So I think he's going to be the X factor here. I'm going to go with Illinois getting a road, technically an upset win, even though they're the higher ranked team. Illinois 28, Indiana 24. Next up, a game that honestly I would have expected to spend a little bit more time on, but it's lost a little bit of its magnitude and its luster. That's Florida, who's 1-2 at number 4, Miami. The Hurricanes are favored by 7.5. I think this is really the Gators' last hope in keeping any hopes for the college football playoff alive. A loss here, they're done, considering the rest of their schedule and how they've looked against who they've played so far. I really think there's no chance. If they win this game, then they're sitting at 2-2, and if they can improve as the season goes along and steal some of those games against ranked opponents, they won't be out of it yet. But really, I think this is Miami's chance as well to get another, it's not going to be a ranked win, but against another win against a quality opponent, a team that was, I guess, ranked in the preseason at least. And I think Miami does that. I think they cover that spread, not by a lot, but I think they do cover it. I'm going to go with Miami 31, Florida 21. Now, going over a bunch of games that I just think are kind of interesting. Arkansas at Memphis. I think Memphis is a good American Conference team, but I think Taylon Green is too much there. I'm going with the Razorbacks. SMU at TCU. This game is a little bit of a toss-up, but I I know SMU has not looked great so far to start the season, but I do think a guy like Kevin Jennings at quarterback is too much for TCU to handle, so I'm going with SMU here. Another interesting matchup, Syracuse at Clemson. Clemson is reeling, and now they've got a quarterback who's among the leaders in college football with over 1,000 passing yards already through just 3 games. That's Steve Angeli, the Notre Dame transfer, now playing for the Orange. I think that's going to be a big test for Clemson. I think a lot of people, myself included, kind of thought, even though they've gotten off to such a slow start, but I do think they get kind of a rebound here against Syracuse. They are going to be tested by Angeli, but I do think Clemson gets the win. North Carolina at Central Florida, kind of an interesting matchup here. Scott Frost was coached by Bill Belichick when he played for the Jets in the 90s. I think it's a win here for UCF. I think Taven Jackson is a good quarterback there. James Madison at Liberty. Liberty has struggled. They've lost to Jacksonville State and to Bowling Green here in the early going in the season. James Madison also was kind of among the favorites or even the top contender out of the Sun Belt. I do think Liberty coming back home gets a good win here. North Carolina State at Duke. Duke has kind of disappointed so far. They're only 1-2. They've lost to Illinois and to Tulane. North Carolina State got a good win against Wake Forest last week, but I do think the Blue Devils get back on the right foot here. South Carolina at Missouri. This game, if South Carolina had beat Vanderbilt, would have been a little bit more interesting. I think Missouri wins at home. Apple Cup, Washington at Washington State. I think the Huskies win there. Also, Civil War going on. Not even really worth the projection. I think Oregon wins comfortably over Oregon State. Arizona State at Baylor. 2 Big 12 teams who really honestly disappointed against SEC opponents, especially Arizona State losing at Mississippi State. Baylor also losing to Auburn. I do think Arizona State, though, is still a really good Big 12 team. I think I'm not quite confident enough anymore to say that I think they're the favorite. I think that'll go to Iowa State and then whoever wins the Texas Tech-Utah game that I predicted earlier. But I think Arizona State wins on the road at Baylor. And then Michigan State at USC, the old Spartans against Trojans, the old battle of history, I guess, here. Obviously, the story of the Trojan horse. I think USC with Jaden Maeva at quarterback gets the win there. So those are my predictions. Kind of a lot more games. There's a lot of kind of under the radar, interesting games. As the season develops more, there's kind of more of those games that are just kind of intriguing as teams start to show, how good or how maybe not as good they are this season. But that is all for this episode of College Football Talk. Let me know your predictions for Week 4, who you think wins those key games. And I will see you guys next time. Peter Burnett signing out. Peace.